Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. During the break, we were actually discussing this, and I think that would be a good place to start. What can be the role of the NCIC? I mean, as you've seen, emotions are heightened in the country. Elections by themselves get you emotional. I mean, voters are asked to pick between different ideologies, and it's all about, aligning yourself with the side that you feel best represents you and your values and your views and your hopes and aspirations. But yet we find ourselves in this position. The NCIC, Professor, has been rather quiet over the last couple of weeks. What are you doing about the situation in the country?
We have been talking to these people underground.
Oh, have you?
Because, yes.
Okay.
Because we don't want, you see, most of the negotiations is not done on the Ngilia of the cameras. So we are trying our best to see whether we can prevent a tragedy, which we think this is an unfolding tragedy. Because anybody who claims to love this country should realize that in both of these people are actually quite capable of producing a very bad situation. Because when a problem is created is when you underestimate the capacity of the other person to create problems for you.
So are you saying here, Professor, that as a commission, you have not only reached out to, but had discussions, not just with Raila Odinga, but with President Uhuru Kenyatta, and all of the other actors in this we are
even talking to other people who can also intervene on our behalf, but you see, because we have nothing concrete, we can't come and tell you the things that we are doing, but we are very concerned. We are concerned because we have seen that they are not respecting each other. First, they need to respect one another. If you remember, apartheid regime was a very bad system. At no time did you hear Mandela disrespecting the leaders who are leading that evil system because he knew he would have to deal with them.
But surely, Professor, a statement from the Commission, even to the Kenyan public, on what is happening, on the demos, on people being shot, on the demos being banned, whichever way you see that to be, but one would expect that the Commission would come out and even speak to the Kenyans. All right, you say there's, other talks that are happening behind the scenes, but what about to Kenyans themselves who are angry, frustrated, confused about obiter dictum and ratio decidendi and all of these other things that are being said? But what is that role that you are playing in terms of, it's calming the temperatures? I mean, surely we have seen the Archbishop of the Anglican Church reaching out to at least some of the leaders. Well, we take your word for it, but surely we've got 10 days to go.
Yeah, and 10 days is a very short time. And 10 days, and as I said, there want to be election. I think they're actually quite capable of obstructing one. We need probably to get a little bit more involved, I think, within the next 5 days, because that is not a lot, and I agree with you, but believe me, we are doing a lot. We are doing a lot, and we are hoping that we will be able to prevent this catastrophe from taking place, because it's not right. But also the demonstrations, also we have seen people with the stones. If the law says unharmed, peaceably, a stone is a weapon. I think also the people organizing the demonstrations, so people can exercise that right, then they should insist that people should be completely unarmed, so that when we see a madman like the one we saw the other day, we know that is a madman, and we insist that the person being dealt with him by the law. I think confusing this, having stones and having the other, those are weapons. And that's no longer a peaceful demonstration.
Okay.
So I think they really need to also organize themselves and enjoy this right peacefully without provoking the police also into acting the way they have acted.
All right, Charles, I just want your comment on the statement that we saw coming out of IBC. I think it came out late last night and is now something we're grappling with regarding the result transmission system. And now it seems like they're saying we will not have electronic transmission, and talking about the reconfiguration of the KEEMS kit, that it was only set up for 2 candidates. That would be Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta on that. And now that there's more, what's your reaction to that? Because that goes right back to a number of the issues that were there before, which was that the IEBC was supposed to be able to send the electronic, data as well as, the text data. But now again, we're hearing that's not going to be possible. And yet this was one of the major contentious issues of the August 8th election. What are your thoughts?
Yvonne, Section 39(1)(c) of the Elections Act was discussed extensively by the Supreme Court. It was discussed in the Raila versus IBC presidential election petition. It was also discussed extensively in the Maina Kiai versus IBC case by the Court of Appeal. And one of the things that the Supreme Court was clear about was that results should be transmitted in the prescribed form, because those are the words used in the current Section 39(1)(c). And so the question arose, what is the prescribed form? You do remember that during the August 8 elections, NASA contested this alphanumeric transmission on the ground that it was not the prescribed form. And they said that the image should have been the one to transmit electronically. And the Supreme Court actually agreed with the argument of the NASA lawyers in court. They said the failure to transmit prescribed forms, the fact that 10,000 were not available from 34As when the results were being declared by Wafula Chebukati, was an indictment of IBC. My understanding, and I'm giving the innocent view because there may be those who have another view, is that IBC wants to comply with that requirement to transmit in the prescribed form, which is to scan the forms and transmit. What they're saying is that they will not transmit the alphanumeric. It's unfortunate if they're not going to transmit the alphanumeric, because there's going to be an extra level of verifiability. But my understanding or reading of Section 39(1)(c) of the Elections Act is that in the prescribed form, as interpreted by the Supreme Court, meant the scanned copies. I think that if they do not transmit the alphanumeric on the ground of inability to have time to configure the system, there is a possibility that the Supreme Court could challenge that situation. But if you read the way the Supreme Court interpreted Section 39(1)(c), there is also a possibility that the Supreme Court would give a tick and say, so long as the forms have gone and the data is coming from the form, not from any other source, then that should be okay. And the last thing I want to say is that we are facing several challenges with electoral management in Kenya because of very many court decisions or legal interpretations that are affecting what IBC has already planned to do. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying it is a reality in Kenya that even in August 8, the same with this October 26th proposed elections, you are finding that legal interpretations of IBC are being overturned by the courts, maybe rightly or wrongly. But the fact is it creates an element of instability and challenge. So IBC has to keep scrambling to correct situations even at the 11th hour before the elections. And definitely this affects the ability to deliver free, fair, credible, verifiable elections.
All right. Vikuna?
Yvonne, I deal with facts. I always remind people, facts, history, very important. We must have memory. Immediately after the nullification, Safa Oti Morpho came to Kenya. What did they say? That they needed time to reconfigure the KIMS kits so that they would not be able to make the same mistakes that they had made before. And in fact, the IEBC used that as the basis for saying they could not conduct elections on October the 17th and move the date to President Uhuru Kenyatta's birthday, October 26th. That was a gift to President Uhuru Kenyatta, mistake number one. Number two, so they said that. They said they are reconfiguring. History also very, very important. Remember Musando, God rest his soul in peace. Musando was at this TV station and also on NTV. Musando explained why there would be no infiltration, hacking, or altering of the results. What did he say? He said two things that are key. He said once you configure the KIMS kit to take the alphanumeric, the number that you key in, the result at the polling station, Then you scan the form from which the results is extracted from. The result that has been declared and that agents and electoral officials have signed. You then press send. That you cannot press send until you do both.
Yeah.
You must put in the alphanumeric, then you actually scan. If you do scanning and you don't put alphanumeric, there will be no send. If you do alphanumeric and you don't scan, there will be no send. So essentially, what Chiloba is telling us is that they are not going to comply with the law and with the orders of the Supreme Court, and that what they are going to do will be subject to alteration and will dovetail with the amendments that Jubilee have done in Parliament. That's what they're telling us. They're telling us that what will happen is this. They will do some caricature of a transmission. We don't know from where, and we don't know what they will be transmitting. Then people will take some forms which have been altered. They will take them to Bomas. These forms will prevail over whatever has been transmitted. And these forms will form the basis of the results. But we would not be able to know where these forms came from. And we would not be able to verify whether these forms are the same things that were announced at the polling station. So what we are having is a sham election. My friend Kanjama is a very bright man. The only reason he chooses not to deal with what I've just said is just because he's not being honest. You have to be honest about these things. Okay. There is no case law that said you only transmit the scanned document and not the alphanumeric. In fact, the challenge of the petitioner, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, was that you needed to do both. That is the inbuilt security in the system.
Okay, I'd like us to start, closing, and there's much to discuss even as we close. Charles, I want to start with you. The President has received the amendments, bill, that were passed by both houses of Parliament. He says he's considering them. Do you think he will sign them, or do you think he should not, in the spirit of compromise? Where do we go from here? If he compromises on that, what do you think should be, should we see from the other side?
I think, Yvonne, some of the amendments in the Election Laws Amendment Act have been overtaken by events already. Because you remember, one of the amendments was what will be done, assuming there's invalidation of results, and there was an elaborate section saying only 2 candidates will stand for the re-election if it's the second one who petitioned and so on. And yet, the decision of Justice Mativo, if it stands, because it has already been challenged in the Court of Appeal, says that all of them should stand effectively. So some of them have been overtaken by events. Some of the matters that are there, I know that Uhuru Kenyatta's team would rather they become implemented and part of the law, like this very contested question of whether Section 83 of the Elections Act should allow the court to nullify an election purely because of failure to comply with legal provisions that may amount to irregularities, or whether it should be shown to affect the result. So that is a legal question. And my feeling is that not being part of that team, but what I'm assessing is that they are waiting to see what will happen in court, probably, with the Supreme Court decision on Tuesday, with the appeal that has been filed on Monday against Justice Mativo's decision, and Uhuru Kenyatta is likely to be advised by his people whether to sign or not. Your second part of the question was whether he should sign or he should not sign. My feeling is that both the Jubilee and the NASA side have genuine grievances about what has taken place so far until where we've reached in the journey to having free and fair elections. And if they go into fair discussions, each side should be ready to yield on some of their demands or desires or weapons. One of the weapons of Uhuru Kenyatta is the Elections Amendment Act. It's not his weapon alone, it came from Parliament, but ultimately it is going to favor his side of the coalition. One of the weapons of Raila Odinga is the declaration that there'll be no elections. My feeling is that if the two sides come together, they should be able to work out a compromise. Or if they don't, then that should be done, as I stated at the beginning of this interview, by somebody applying to the institution which has credibility at this stage, which is the Supreme Court, to interrogate even that matter of the election laws amendment. Of course, they cannot be interrogated before they are signed.
Before they're signed. Okay, all right. Finally, Prof, where do you see us going? Where do we get clarity? How do we start to find some sort of proper direction?
I don't know where you get clarity. What I know is I heard the president saying he will sign when the bureau comes to his desk. I know that. I want to agree with the Kanjama that these people need to talk, and there were other Kenyans who are saying that the two major parties, they need to find the common ground, and they need to protect this country. And I want to advise that the great leaders are actually known during crisis. It's not when everything is running well. So there's a cause for these people to rise up to that level and give us a peaceful country so that we can continue doing our business in a normal way and they can continue leading. That is my position.
All right. Miguna, is there common ground? And you said there will be no election. Where do we go from here?
Yvonne, first of all, your question, which was a wrong question, because you seem to draw a moral equivalence between one who has rigged an election, then passes the law to make sure that the second rigging is not overturned. That law is inconsequential. We don't care what President Uhuru Kenyatta does with that law. Whether he signs it or not, it's inconsequential. It will be struck down. So it's immaterial. They are engaged in an exercise in futility, and we don't care. He can go ahead and do whatever he's doing. The citizens of this country will defend the Constitution and will defend the democracy. We are not going to give it in because of Uhuru Kenyatta, give it up because of Uhuru Kenyatta. We are not going to surrender to his ruthlessness. We are going to defeat him. Moi was more powerful. Moi was more ruthless, and we defeated Moi. I know this is his studio, but I can say so. We are going to defeat President Uhuru Kenyatta. That's number one. Number two, there will be no elections in accordance with the Constitution and the applicable laws on October 26th. You can take that and bank it at Citibank, not Equity. Number three, where do we go from here? We sort out the crisis, we sort out our democratic and constitutional mess, and we deal with these despots once and for all.
Do we do it by talking, Miguna?
We are going to do it by any means necessary. Mark my word, by any means necessary.
All right.
Bring the temperatures down and don't worry about it.
Well, we're looking to you to be able to do that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Charles Kanjama, we thank you for your time and your analysis. Whether it's the Supreme Court to which we go, as you are proposing for some direction, Professor, we're probably looking to the NCIC and a number of other commissions in the country, or whether an election is not going to be able to sort out these issues and where we go from here. Miguna, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, Charles.
Pleasure.
That's our conversation. So, are you a little bit more enlightened as to some of the options that are available for us, including that election on October 26th? Do you think that that election is going to be able to solve the crisis that we find ourselves in? Well, you let me know. The hashtag is CheckPoint. Let's continue this discussion there.